Hey, it's Beyond the Pew.
Beyond the Pew. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
One of the three.
One of the threes.
Or overnight, middle of the night.
Middle of the night, depending on where
all
you are
around
in
the
country.
world, different time zones.
Different time zones
All
from Hawaii
around
to
the world. To Alaska.
To Alaska.
Hawaii, all around the world, time zones. We are
Changes.
not alone today.
We are
Pastor,
not.
Pastor Erick Gill, as always,
Yep.
on the
Pastor
podcast.
Bruce, it's Reverend
100% attendance. One of us says 100% attendance on
Yep,
the podcast.
amen.
It is not you, it's me.
Good for
and,
you.
we're here together again. But we have a guest today. First time.
Special guest.
First time Beyond
all
the Pew.
the way from Springfield,
Springfield,
Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah.
He's here with us.
Nathan.
And looking sharp, looking dapper today.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Color coordinated with the couch.
I've been looking at
You
a lot
did
of
it on
pictures.
purpose.
Yeah.
Because you watch every episode.
Every episode.
I'd like to clarify that.
Yes, please.
I don't think I've watched any of the episodes.
Okay.
I listen. I'm a devout listener.
Oh, he said the
Okay.
volumes.
And so far this is very confusing because I'm used to hearing your guys' voices in my ears.
Got it.
But now you get to see us.
now in
Now
person
it's real, like it's here.
it's
You're
so
part of the
authentic.
room.
Yeah,
It's like you're
wild.
part of the room beyond the pew.
I feel beyond the pew right now. And
Yeah.
I listen to all my podcasts
Yes.
at like 2x speed. So this feels
Absolutely.
this feels so slow.
It is
so slow.
I would like to advise anyone that is listening not to listen to me into double speed.
I do it.
You
it's
get
great.
half of what I'm
Into
saying.
what?
Exactly.
To what speed?
To whatever you said.
In double speed?
Yeah,
double
double
speed.
speed.
2
It's great.
Yeah, maybe
Eric
slow
in
me
2x,
down.
wonderful.
It is. You can get through a lot more material a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But if you can't process as quickly, it
So
might.
I just a side note as we're having the
Please.
conversation. I heard this. I think the don't quote me on things. I think it was Craig Gershell who said this. That when he was in seminary, don't quote me on it though. That when he was in seminary or in school, that one technique that he did to be able to read books quick was that he would read the first sentence of each paragraph, and supposedly, when you do that, like it carries the idea of the whole book because most writers they write their main idea on the first paragraph and then they develop. Have you guys ever done that?
Well, I've not written any books recently, so I've not had to do that. But
No, before. I mean, not recently. Like
No,
ever.
when
You
he
ever read a book?
reads.
reading?
Yeah.
Reading.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the same thing that when it comes to speed reading, you're supposed to read like the first, and I read the first and last,
Oh,
like
and last.
statement of each paragraph, and
That's
then you would go to the next one.
life changing. I wish I would have known that in college.
Yeah, but you're gonna miss a lot of detail. I mean, can you imagine how much you're missing?
Yeah, but I mean,
If you had done that in college, you probably would have missed a lot
I would have missed a lot.
because any detail questions. I mean,
But don't do that with the Bible. You have to read every single sentence, right? Is that what you're saying?
well, I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that you would miss a lot. That's all. I mean,
Nathan,
if you
was
just
you
read,
here?
I'm glad to be here. This is great.
Yeah,
The banter between you two in person, unreal. Unreal.
Nathan, why don't you tell
yes.
our audience like who you
Yes.
are? Like who are you?
Yes,
No,
please.
let's
tell us.
continue the reading
No, I like
techniques,
it.
please. That'd
No,
be great.
please, go ahead.
So my name is Nathan Eckberg. I've been attending Maranatha for 27 years.
27, wow.
I was born into this church. Family started coming when it
You
started.
were born here, like literally in the church.
In the
born.
church.
Basically. I
Really?
mean, might as well have been. It was probably somewhere in Akron, but
So you weren't, but you're
born
here.
into. Like I was
Got it.
born and came
Baptized here?
baptized here.
Wow. Who baptized you, remember?
Butch Pursley, there's pictures of it.
Butch Pursley. Were
Yeah.
you one of the first ones?
No, it was when we were in this building, so
Okay.
it probably was a long time
Okay.
after.
But one of the first in the nursery.
Yeah, my mother would say I was the first baby in the
Your mother
nursery.
would say, because you say that all the time too.
I've never said that before.
You have said that before. You said it many times to me before.
I think people say that about
But
me.
you're here. Yeah, I get it. I get
You're
it.
a pioneer in many ways.
Yeah,
But,
something
Indeed.
like that.
Indeed.
what do you do for a living?
I am a computer developer programmer by trade, so I sit at a computer all day and I write code, which a lot of people don't know what that means sometimes, but that's what I do. Integrate
I'm
systems together.
I was falling asleep when
finance
you were telling me
systems.
that.
Oh,
Nathan. I'm
it's
kidding.
pretty
That's
boring.
the joke with people who do computers. Is people act like it's a boring thing, but it's quite
never heard that
fascinating.
joke.
It's quite fascinating.
never heard
I've never heard that either.
You've never heard that when people say that people start talking about technology
No.
and they're like,
No.
No,
like as though
It's because you're what generation are you? Like,
I don't even know. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
exactly.
I don't
You're
even know what I
Generation
relate.
old.
I don't label myself.
You
so
know,
I don't know.
millennials and Generation C, like they're all about technology. So
Are you millennial?
I am.
I believe I am on the cusp.
No,
No,
man.
I'm pretty
How
sure.
old are you?
I'm 41.
Nah.
I think look it up. Look it up. I'm
What
not,
is all right,
I'm not saying I'm
what is
claiming
the
it.
latest What is the latest Nintendo out?
The latest current Nintendo?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Nintendo Switch.
Okay, what is the latest PlayStation?
5.
What is the latest
Yeah, I know these
Xbox?
things. Yeah, I know these things.
These are just youth pastor questions.
What is the latest
I know,
Xbox?
I know.
Wait, I'm moving
These are
for that's a
potential
purpose.
like gifts for youth group games.
Correct.
Like that's
What
what
is the
this
latest Xbox?
I have no idea.
And how did the Bills did in the Super Bowl or on the
Super Bowl.
playoff?
What is he talking about? This guy.
Well, they didn't make it to the Super Bowl. That's for
I know.
sure.
I said, you're,
Sure not going
these
to make
questions firing away. It was a little joke. I was just joking around with you, Nathan, about
Oh
the
man, it was
computer
funny.
technology, etc.
Throwback to our boy JC.
I have no idea what that
Yeah,
means.
JC.
What does that mean? Throwback to our boy Jay-Z.
When he was here on
Jesus
the
Christ?
podcast. No, Jesus
Oh.
Christ. Jay-Z. Anyways, we're glad you're here.
This is going downhill.
Yeah, it's going downhill. We're
going
glad you're
downhill.
here. You know, we're doing our podcast right now. Our series is on community, life and community. And we have had Pastor Steve. You and I have shared about it, the
Yes.
importance of community. And one of the things that's interesting that when you think about community, like it can be perceived that as pastors, of course, we will be telling people that you should be involved in community. But I think it's gonna be awesome. It's awesome that you're here today because you can share with us from your perspective as someone that is not a pastor, that you are obviously involved in the church, but that you are working on a job that doesn't relate to ministry or to a church setting, and yet you have shared in the past, and I know that you believe this way, the importance of community. So I'm excited to see what are some of your inputs. It should be good.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of as a launching spot for that, you work in a full-time capacity outside the church. You're involved in service within the church. You serve in our music ministry. You are also part of a small group, and you and your wife both. And so where do you see the most important connection points for you, for your family, for you and your wife currently as it relates to this aspect of community at the church?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. The most important points of connection. So I think for us and our family, our small group connect group is huge, which is wild to think about it, that we started that group nearly like 5 years ago, and we've kind of grown from there. But like 5 years ago, my wife and I got married, and Mike Duma, who you guys might be familiar with, you might know that name.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. He had like basically reached out and was like, "Hey,
Let's just stop for a second because so people know that Mike's
Yeah.
not dead.
oh wait, what?"
Because if people hear that and they're depending on the generation of people
Yeah.
that are listening all around the world, they might hear that and be like, "Oh my goodness, what happened to
yeah,
Mike?"
in Hawaii,
So,
it might mean
yes.
something
so
different.
it might be something completely
Yeah.
different, but
Yeah.
which means he's no longer here at Maranatha. He's at 539, church planter, etc.
May his time in Maranatha rest in peace.
Yes.
Yes,
rest in
yes.
peace.
Thank you.
But yeah, Mike basically just reached out to
Millennial?
what generations? But Mike reached out to a bunch of us married folk, all like freshly married. We had one couple that was like getting married the week after we first met, and was like, "Hey, I want to get together and have a small group. We don't have a small group right now for where we're at, so let's do it." And we did that. We grew to like what felt like 20 couples. We broke apart in smaller small groups. Mike went and planted his church, and then we've stuck around. Eric and I still lead that small group. I took over teaching. This last week was my first week teaching, and it's just been it's been great to have that community, and to be able to be ministered to and then minister to others. A couple sessions ago, we read that Life and Community book that you guys had mentioned last week, and it was probably one of the most influential books in my understanding of biblical community. It put into perspective a lot of things I think that I just hadn't considered, and just really changed what I thought biblical community was. Because to me, I've been at Maranatha my whole life. I've been in small groups, and I've never like dissected. This is what this is. The book lays out like a foundation, a roadmap for like here's where you start. Like here's where we start to get to know people, and we start to unravel that. And when you become closer, we can do things like confession, and we can do things like, hey, my wife was, Steve's wife was sick, and his whole Connect group brought groceries over, and things like that. Like when we grow as a Connect group and follow that that map that he laid out, like we just see those things happen naturally as like they grow together. So I think that has been just a huge, huge thing for me. within the church to, as a main connection point. I mean, I've made friends for people I've never met before. Our kids have friends in there, which is awesome. Connecting with other young kids and stuff. So yeah, I love our Connect group. That'd definitely be the finite point of where I would go.
Yeah. So in that setting, what would you say has been beneficial for you, for your personal spiritual growth? And even, you're married, you mentioned you're married, you have kids, and even as a family, what has been also beneficial being part of a community?
Yeah, I think one of the things that they talk about in that book that has just been true for the entirety of our small group as, just a group of married people that we're all getting started together being married and no one had any experience was the position of none of us have this figured out. When you go into that kind of community, it's you look at that married couple and that married couple and they're like, oh, that couple, Bruce and Shoshana, they've got it figured out. They know exactly what it's like to be married and all the right things to do and say. And as you grow together, you realize, oh, actually, none of us know anything. And it's incredibly comforting to then come together and all be just confused and just as you are with other people and be like, oh, this is what I need to learn, and you can grow in those things and go through hard times. I think that's been huge for us is just seeing, oh, other people have problems too. That's completely normal. And then how do we come alongside that biblically?
No, that's good. Authenticity's a tremendous asset in a small group or in a Connect group, right? Because no one comes in with this perspective that I'm not in need of any kind of help. I have everything figured out. Everything's going the way it needs to be going. But you're right. Sometimes that can be a hindrance to people wanting to get into a group is they feel like they don't measure up. They're not good enough. They look at the people that are already there thinking man, those are all people who have everything figured out. And that's helpful to hear, right? I mean, so if you rewind back to 5 years ago, then you had mentioned Mike put out kind of a thing, hey, if you're young married or newly married and there's a group getting together, what was kind of the catalyst for you and Kayleen to think, man, we need to be a part of that?
This is for us.
Yeah.
I mean, at that time, so I had, I'd been out of high school. I think I was in a group with a couple guys, like Tyler Jones, shout out Tyler Jones, and previous guest Jeff Zimmerman. We were all in a small group together of us guys. I don't really want to bring my wife to that. And so it was I guess this is, where we go now. And there wasn't much else going on. So I was Mike says, we're going to do this. That sounds like fun. I like some of the people in that group. I guess we'll go check it out. What's the worst that could happen? And 5 years later, we're still in it. We're still growing with all these people and some of them that have been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
have you felt that will you say that you've been in church for all these years and will you say that it at the end of the day it was your responsibility to seek out and to join this group, or would you say that had Mike not done this, you probably wouldn't have joined? Where I'm getting at is there are people, maybe even in our church right now, that they have been coming here for a while, but they're not part of a community, and maybe similar to your position at the time, they're waiting for somebody to come and say, "Hey, we're starting a brand new small group. Will you want to join?" Do you still think that that's? Do you think that that's okay? Do you think that in your experience, you wish that, man, I should have done this sooner, or where'd you land on this?
Yeah, I would say, when we had talked about this topic being what we would talk about, I was just thinking back to, all of the small groups I've been a part of, and I've been a part of a ton, right? And just all of the memories and all of the things I've learned, back in our high school small groups, there are things today that I will still quote to people, just biblical things, just random things, that still just impact me today. I always think of a time where my leader Nick and I were standing on top of a balcony watching some of the other kids play football in a high school and middle school group, and he was like, "Look at this, we're all just together. None of these kids would have hung out together if it wasn't for this small group." And it's things like that that I still look back on, and I'm like, if you're not in some sort of community, you should be, and whether you think it's your responsibility or not, you want to do this. So if you don't have one, find one. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not just whose responsibility is it? It's you should just desire this as a believer. This should be just a yearning thing in your soul. And it is. I was listening to a pastor recently that was talking about just that we are just from our creation, we're designed for community. We desire that. And he was talking about some studies they were doing on social media where, like, when we scroll through social media, we get this, like, people talk about, like, feeling tense and not comfortable, and it's like, we think we have community in, like, this, like, social media, but it's like, no, like, our bodies truly do want more, and that's, like, a sociology study they were doing. That's not even biblical. And it's like, oh, crazy that they figured out what the Bible's talking about for, all these time. Like, oh, the scientists figured it out. But it's like, we crave that. And if you don't have that, you should search it out. Like, more than responsibility, you should desire that. And you want to be a part of it. It's life-changing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think that that's also why, like, our current culture is, like, if you watch everything that is coming out, like, it's to combat that. Like, our culture wants us to be isolated.
Yeah.
Like when you think about the enemy is prowling like a lion, like, looking who to devour. Like, what is one of the ways that he's using to devour Christians and followers of Jesus? By isolation.
Yeah.
Like, think about, like, Adam and Eve, the moment that they fell, like, what did they do? They isolate. And how every single human being, especially those that are of the faith, that they have this desire that to just isolate themselves because of fear, shame, and all of the different things, thinking that that is the safest place that they can be. When in reality, to your point, we've been designed to be in community. Yeah. That is part of our DNA as followers of Jesus, to live life in community.
Yeah, we just flourish when we do. Like, you're never going to, like, join a community and just be like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. Like, why did I do this? Unless you're with a community with Eric, sometimes it gets like that. But it's usually pretty good.
I think you. When I'm not there. It depends. I think you hit on something too that we can ignore when you think about social media and the presence of social media and everybody posting. Anybody who's posting something, they're posting it for the point of others interacting with what they just posted, right? The goal is likes, views, sharing, whatever. And it's for the point of whatever I'm posting, I want people to see. And even that demonstrates a longing for acceptance and community, because people aren't doing it just for themselves, right? Like, if I post a picture on social media, which I never do, but if I did, I'm posting it kind of as something like, hey, like, people who know me or know my family or friends of mine, they might interact with this or think this is funny or think this is something that they would be like, oh, that's neat. And so that's why I'm posting. I'm not posting it so I, like, can look at it myself. I'm posting it for others to give opinions and to give views and et cetera. So that even shows this longing for acceptance and community with people. And it's in some ways artificial or superficial, because there's no sense of face-to-face interaction when we're simply doing it in that world, right? Yeah. And so taking it to the next step where you can sit down, and you mentioned about, like, listening to the podcast as opposed to sitting down on the podcast and being here present. There's a difference between the interaction that could be had through that and through this, right? Yeah. And so I think that's sometimes missed, and people feel, to your point, they have authentic community when it's in some ways artificial.
Yeah, it's the illusion that you are in community. It's like we have found ourselves believing that, if we do all of these different things, like, we are connected. But yeah, that's a great point. Like, you even coming here and saying, like, I've been hearing you guys, but being in the room is different. And think about, like, all the people in the church, and I'm focusing more on the church, obviously, because this purpose of this podcast is for those that believe in their life beyond the pew. But you think about how many people in the church, they find their comfort in just listening and watching something online and just, or even just coming to church and just sitting through the service and leaving, and not realizing how much they're missing out from not being involved or being part of a community. Yeah. Like, all age groups. Like, I would say, how people will say, like, you never graduate from the gospel, meaning, like, you never stop needing the gospel. In the same way, like, we never stop needing community.
Yeah,
like,
there's never a point where we're like, I'm old enough, like, I don't need to join a small group. Figured it out.
Solo. I mean, it's you don't see like. And let's be clear too. Like, there is times that it is acceptable, and maybe it's the smartest thing for individuals to isolate themselves and to have a time of recharge, or, like, I think you look at Jesus' ministry, like, he will go out and he will be with the masses, and then he will retreat himself to pray and to be alone. Like, I'm not saying, like, that's not bad, but notice like how he's always surrounded by somebody. Like he always goes back to his disciples. Like for us, like you may be in a season where it's okay for you to be alone, but that shouldn't be the norm. Yeah. We were designed to be in community. We have to be a part of a community.
Well, I think what goes with this as well is the responsibility specifically to the body of Christ within the body of Christ, right? I mean, Paul lays out that we are members of the body, and each one has its own part, right? And so the whole body cannot be an eye, and the whole body cannot be an ear. Where would the sense of smell be, et cetera? So that's the other aspect of the body of Christ, is it doesn't make sense within the health of the body of Christ for any of its members to isolate itself from the rest of the body. And so that's true in community as well. We have responsibilities to one another within the body of Christ that are impossible to fulfill, and it's impossible to truly be obedient to what we're called to be within the body of Christ, independent of the body of Christ. To think, I'm like a severed arm off of the body and I'm going to go do my own thing. Well, that's not profitable for the body. So we need to be within the body doing that. So with you and Kayleen, you guys have children, work schedules, social schedules. The older your kids get, the more schedules that will be put in the mix. How do you find the time to be able to be part of a small group? How do you find the time to make community an important aspect of your life? Because that's the big, I don't want to say the number one excuse, but a lot of times the excuse you hear for people that are not ministry, as far as full-time ministry involved, is like, hey, listen, I got a full-time job, I got a family, I got kids, I got a schedule, and yet you've made a point to make community something that's happening in your home. How do you make the time to do that?
I mean, I think it's like, anything that we want to do to make a habit of. So honestly, that's what we've done. And when we don't have like a connect group going on that week, it's like, what do we do? Like we desire to be there. But I think the biggest thing is you just have to make time for it. And it's like anything. Like I want to start going to the gym. I want to start like writing a book every day. Whatever you're gonna do, you have to make time for that, and some things have to go, right? I think back to like Craig Peters always gave the illustration of like, starting your day with reading the Bible, and he would have like the glass jars and you could dump all the stuff in, and it's like, oh look, it doesn't fit if you put the Bible on the top, but if you put it on the bottom, everything fills in around it. And it's like that with anything we do, where it's like, if you want to do this, if you truly want to do this, you'll find time to do it. Because I think a lot of that is, it's like, well, I have a full-time job, like I can't join a connect group. And it's like, at the most, like, I mean, we hang out for a long time in our connect group because we like each other. But you might be like a 2-hour commitment out of your week. Like, just don't sleep that
and a lot
much
of times it's every other week. Even.
Some connect groups don't even meet every week. We meet every week because we like each other so much.
So what has been some, like, in your position, maybe, what have been some excuses that either you have used or people that you know of have used as to why they don't want to build community? And not necessarily like your current small group, but like in any area. Maybe there's like a single young adult, maybe they are older married couples, maybe they're students. Like,
yes, he's trying to include him. He's like, not your current connect group, because he's involved in that.
Yeah, but
like outside of the current connect.
I thought he was asking for excuses why I haven't been at small groups, so he could call me out.
I'm calling
I thought
him
that's
out.
what he was looking for.
No, but on a serious note, like what are some things that you have heard? Because maybe there is somebody in the audience that is listening or watching that they have used that excuse, and that's why they're not part of a connect group or a community. And so let's try to get some of those out just to see, because like to your point, or what we have been saying in the past few weeks, there's not a valuable excuse as to why you're not in a community. But I'm just curious, what are some things that you have heard?
I think one of like the big things I hear is like, oh, there's just like not a group like for me. Like there's that group, but I don't know if I really like fit that group, like whatever that means,
vibe.
right? Like,
vibe is like when let me explain it to you. Vibe is like when you walk into a room, it's kind of like the way that you feel in the atmosphere. Where you feel in the atmosphere, we call that the vibe. Okay, sorry, I had to
spell that for me.
VIBE.
It's not bad.
So.
You always say that. He always says that. So spell that. You won't spell it. So I was trying to do it. That's an Eric Gill thing. He's trying to distract you from the question.
I know.
No. I just wanted to interject.
And listen, we just have to give one caveat, because Jeff Zimmerman.
I've known him since I was born.
Did Jeff give you any tips tell you to say or do anything when you came on this podcast? Because Jeff, I think, was a little bit bitter from when he was on a podcast because his joke about the hat thing didn't go over well, and I think he was really disappointed. So I want the audience to know, like, I had you in youth group. Like,
Yep.
you were one of the youth group kids I had when I was
You were
youth
his
pastor.
youth pastor.
Yes.
100%.
Wow.
And so the
story.
interaction,
How old
trying
he
to,
is.
and I had a joke to start off that
Wow.
kind of failed about your joke. Like, we know each other very well.
Yes.
So if you're a guest on this, it's not that we're trying to rip on people that come on the thing. Like, if we don't know you well, we're not going to do that, right? We're not going to try to make jokes at your expense.
Compare how you dealt with how you dealing with him, and how you dealt with Tommy.
Yes,
And we had
absolutely.
Tommy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tommy.
Tommy, you
Eric,
don't-
well,
you-
you saw the one. You heard the one with
I
Tommy.
did listen to that, yeah.
Eric was like
was
resume
on fire.
Eric. He was like resume Eric. He was
Yeah.
like putting on
You're
display because he wanted to
networking.
be
I wish
called.
Eric would be like that with me.
He wanted to be called to speak at Word of Life camps and stuff like
Networking.
that. So he wanted to show himself to be very professional.
Yeah.
With Tommy here, and
There's
so,
a difference between being passionate and being professional. We were
Passionate.
talking about generations.
Yes, passionate.
So,
But anyhow,
anyways.
back to your answer. Excuses. You've heard.
Excuses. So like, there's not a mold for you.
Yeah, I think that, like, so when we had our, we just started, Maranatha Young Adults, shout out, check it out.
Hashtag.
Wow.
It's been great so
It's
far.
called what?
Maranatha Young Adults. You
Yep.
can follow that
Yep.
Maranatha.youngadults on Instagram if you're into that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And there's a gathering that happens
The
called
Well.
The well, the
The
very first
well.
time will be happening
The well.
today.
Hey,
if
okay.
it's
Well,
airs, yeah.
As it
don't
airs,
confuse
yeah.
people because it's is it
This it will be this Friday.
Yes, okay, okay,
But
very
we're
good.
recording
Well,
this
what's the date for that?
the
If they listen
27th.
3 weeks.
27th. Yes, 27th.
Once a month.
It may have already happened if you're listening to this on the day after
Post,
the,
yes, correct.
it gets posted.
That's the only reason I
But-
said it might be Saturday. They listen to
Yeah.
it and be like, "Oh, Saturday night, the well."
Yeah, no, the 27th
There we
from
go.
6 to 8. Great time.
But that happens once a month as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So just another opportunity.
But you
for
won't be there at the
community.
end of May.
I won't.
I'll probably be there.
Yeah, you'll be there.
I'll,
though.
I'll probably be
Okay.
there. More than likely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lord
You
willing.
better be there.
Nice.
Lord willing.
Nice.
But the mold,
yeah,
like,
so go ahead, the mold.
yeah.
So like we, before we started that, it's like, oh, there's nothing for young adults. Oh, there's nothing for
Yep.
males between 36 and 40 that I could join that also has a they're really into sports. And it's like, what are you talking about? But the same pastor that I had listened to had talked about, God sovereignly controls every single person we get to interact with, every situation we get to be in, every group that we get to a part of. And he has put us there for a very specific reason.
Okay.
And so you might say, there is not a group for me, but I would say to you, how do you know?
That God has gone before, planned
Yeah.
this group for you.
But, what I'm saying is, this group together
Yeah.
could be the most beneficial thing for you in the entire world.
Absolutely.
And could God not use those people that you thought you would never talk to in your life?
Yeah.
Not only could he does.
He can.
Yeah.
He will.
He does. And
Well, I think it's like interesting because you have people that have said like, man, there's nothing for us for my station in life.
Yeah.
And then when something is presented that is offered for that stage of life, then the excuse or the reason why they're not so quick to jump in is like, well, I'm not sure if I want to join in yet. Like, I want to try it out. I want to see because I don't know if it's actually what I need.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one excuse to the next one.
some of that, though, I think is human nature. Like, I think self-preservation is kind of human nature in the sense that
Well, explain that.
when we have something,
spell that?
Well, when people say, well, I want to see what happens. I want to see if it's for me, etc. I think that's kind of like a self-protecting, like built-in thing in us that everybody naturally, I think, feels that way of like, well, let me wait and see before I would just jump in. I think part of the reason for that is maybe there's not a clarity about how necessary and valuable the community aspect is. But I feel like in
I
some
wouldn't say that
ways,
there's not a clarity. I mean, depending on where you're at, I wouldn't say that there's not clarity. I think it's more the individual doesn't have an understanding.
could be, but I
of-
think some of it too is that people aren't doing it because they're trying to make an excuse so much as they authentically are nervous about
Yeah.
something new that they don't know if it's going to be something that they'll fit into or that they would benefit from, and sometimes it takes time.
Yeah.
But I also believe sometimes people just don't want to, and so
Yeah.
they use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
And I think all these can fall into those categories.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is
and,
when
and to your point, like it is okay if there's something new and you're nervous to jump in.
Yeah,
Like-
that's what I'm saying.
Like
Yeah.
like I wouldn't expect if you're never gonna swim in, I wouldn't expect you to jump in the pool, right? Like you take your time, But the point is, it's like at what point will you then actually get in the pool? You know, I'm going back to the illustration, I kind of like it. At what point will you actually get on the pool and start try to swim, right?
Yeah.
Like in the same way, like I understand that if maybe there's something new that maybe you're in a church that, you know, that is now presenting an opportunity for you to get plugged in. Maybe there's a friend of yours is starting a small group, you know, with the time with you and Mike, and you maybe have some reservation, but what will be the point? Like, what needs to happen for you to make the step?
Yeah.
So, all right, it's done. We're done with reservations. It's time to build community.
When I think that's where also the necessity of individuals being willing to care enough about people to invite them and come with them, right? It's a lot more intimidating when a couple or individual is jumping in kind of like as the newbie to a group or the new couple to a group, as opposed to, hey, there's a couple in the group already that's invited me in. And they know going into it, I at least know this other couple, or I at least know this other individual. So that goes back to responsibility, not only on the one who needs to be part of community, but those that are already in the community. How valuable is it to them to see their friends have community? And that puts a real responsibility on our shoulders as those that are engaged in community to look at those that are not and say, man, they need community. They would benefit. I'm going to do my part and bringing them in, you know, and I'll do it with them, even if it requires sacrifice on my part.
And I think that is so huge right now because so many people all across the ages are in isolation. And they're hurting. They're alone. Like if you talk to people, like they tell you, even people that are maybe in relationships, maybe that they're married, maybe that like that they just feel alone. That like loneliness is like rapidly spreading across the world. And for those of us that have experienced and have enjoyed and have seen the value of community, you know, instead of like criticizing and like getting on people in a negative way of like, man, I can't believe you're not in this community, how we have a responsibility to your point of like, hey, listen, like this is actually beneficial. Like this is good for you. This will be something that God can use to flourish you.
Well, and a lot of times I think even when we mistake community as people will be, maybe they'll be together, but they're not necessarily present. Right, because everybody's in their phones, everybody's doing their own thing, everybody's isolated, even though they're in the same room. You know, if we're all sitting here and each of us have our phones out and we're like our heads are buried in our phones, we might not say one word to each other, but we're sitting in the same vicinity.
It's like you're sitting in the same room, sending each other's meme. Like how ironic is that? Have you ever done that with your wife?
Indeed.
You sit, it's like in the late at night. And you're sitting by each other, and instead of talking, you're sending each other memes?
Oh, sending memes.
I've never done that.
Memes.
You do that? I know, I've never done that.
I've done that.
I'm kidding. I have done that.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you were perfect.
Bruce, do you know what memes are?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
I'm so old that I don't know.
wanted to make
I have
sure.
no idea.
So
I mean,
a
I'm
meme,
obviously
a
so
meme,
old.
a meme is like funny pictures.
No, please tell me. Yeah, what is it?
Can you spell that?
MEME.
What is it, though? What is a meme?
Yeah, it's like funny pictures or videos.
So any funny picture or video is a meme?
That is like, yeah.
Oh.
That's like
I
a
don't think
very
that's
generic.
accurate. I don't think that's accurate.
No, it's not.
Do you need me to tell you what a meme is?
Go ahead, tell me.
I'm not going to tell you. If you don't know, I'm not going to
Yeah,
tell
I
you.
know what it is.
So,
Well, tell me what it is.
All right, anyways,
so to
Yeah.
bring it back to the wives.
Yeah.
So to bring back to the wives, I wanted to shout out my wife because I think she does a really good job of kind of what we were talking about.
Wow.
You might not know I'm on a podcast. I'm talking with people with a microphone, but I'm a very shy guy. Like new people
I
freak
thought
me
you
out.
meant you have a podcast. I was
No,
like,
no, no,
really?
no.
I was like, whoa.
Why do I not know
Go
about
ahead, give
this?
it to
No, no, no.
You're a very shy guy. Does photo shoots.
Yeah, yeah.
All kinds of. Yeah. Go ahead. Go
But
ahead.
I'm very like apprehensive towards new people. But my wife, when she sees like someone new at the church that might look like our age, or they have kids, or she like meets someone, she's like, Nathan, we should invite them to our small group. Like they probably need a small group. Like we should invite them. And I think that is so important. So much more like, oh, you know, I don't want to rag on people and be like, you need to look for a small group. If you're not looking for a small group,
Yeah.
rawr. It's like. Also, believers, reach out to people. Like, be a friend to people that you know, or you come. It's like if you talk to someone every week at church, and they're not involved. Like, invite them.
Yeah.
It's okay to invite people to your Connect group. Like, that's okay.
It's good
So
advice.
one of the things that I admire about you and Kayleen is your guys is hard to just like make yourself available for people. And one of the ways that you guys do that is even hosting, like something simple as just opening your home as a place where community can happen. You know, I've been in small groups before even prior to Maranatha, where like you were part of a community, but it was always a battle. Like you were on books, you were in community, but in reality, it never actually happened because there was there was never someone that was willing to host, and the ones that were always hosting, they get tired of hosting, blah, blah, blah. But something that I do admire about you guys is like you have this heart to actually make your home a place where community can happen. Yeah. And you don't get bothered. It doesn't bother you how often, it happens. Like you even say like, hey, it is our pleasure, like every single week to do it. And if I didn't intervene, you would probably do it every single week. But what I'm curious, what led you guys to that place? Like, why is it that you guys feel, is it would you say it's a spiritual the way that God has spiritually gifted you, or would you say it's just, why is the question?
It's funny you say that because like I always think about that as well. Like we get to host a lot, and thank you for saying that. But like I look at myself, and my wife I think would say the same thing. Like neither of us think that we have the gift of hospitality. Like, and I think I am like the world's worst host. Like if you walk in my house, we sit down, have dinner, it'll be like 3 hours before I realize you probably have nothing to drink. Like I am the world's worst host probably. Like shout out coming to my house. But we just love doing it and love, at least I do. Maybe my wife hates it, who knows? But she always offers, so I guess she doesn't hate it much. But we love it. I love to see people come in to our home and we can just use that for God's glory. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. When we bought the house that we're in now, we bought it from a couple that attends Maranatha here. And they said, it's a great hosting house for small groups. And, I like heard that, and the driveway's real big and fit a lot of cars in. So it's like jam them in. I was like, we got room, like keep them coming. And I just love being able to see that happen. When we bought the house, I just remember praying like, Lord, just like give me opportunities to like use this house to bring people in. Cause it's like, it's just got like an area that everyone can kind of sit and be around each other. And it's like, I want that to be used for that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, cool, we can put kids' toys there, but it'd be really great if like we could get small groups in there. We could get a bunch of kids in there. Like we're always just open to having people over, and I don't think we're good at it by any means, which is a shout out to, if you don't want to, try it. It's pretty great. Like just having people there and using that for God's glory it's just being a great steward of what God has given us. Like it's only by God's grace that I have that house. Like we've been able to, he's provided for us that we could do that. And it's like, I just want to take that and share that with my believers. And I mean, it's fun. You don't have to like get out of the house. You don't have to load the kids in the car. Yeah. That's the other benefit.
Great.
and that might be like, if you're listening or watching, that might be what you will have to do. Maybe you'll find yourself in a position where you don't have a community, but you do have a home that could be open for other people. Yep. And maybe one of the action steps that you can have as we're talking, and we'll continue to talk about community, is for you to open your homes and say, hey, there are three couples that I've noticed, that I've seen, or these 3 guys or these 3 girls that I've seen, and I would like to invite you to my home and for us to connect and do life together, kind of like how the Bible talks about.
Yeah, and for all that I said, it's not easy. Like hosting isn't easy. Like preparing, like all of the people that host our small group, we all like make dinner for everyone every week. Like none of that's easy. Like you know what I mean? Like it can be a struggle, but there is just so much joy in being able to do that for people and see, and because if we didn't host and like you didn't host and like we didn't have these people that would host, we wouldn't have a small group, and I would be distraught. Like right, like if we didn't have a place to go, and if you have a small group, you don't have a place to go, they can meet at the church, right, Bruce? Like,
yeah, and I was going to say too, I think people have to understand too, if you're hosting a small group in your home, that doesn't mean you have to be the teacher for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, and so I think that's sometimes the misconception is people think, oh, I'd love to host, and I love hospitality, but I can't teach, or I'm not going to. You don't need to. I mean, there's plenty of situations where folks will host at their home, and then someone else will be the one that's the one that's leading the discussion that night, or they're leading the teaching. But if you have gifts of hospitality, or if you're longing for community, and I think that's important what you said about even families with young kids. A lot of times people don't go to community groups because they have kids that need to be in bed by a certain time, or they're like, yeah, it's real difficult to get everybody out of the house. host then, because then you can control for your own kids when they go to bed and what time, and you don't have to worry about trying to navigate all that, but you don't necessarily have to teach. And yes, you're correct. Even at our church, we have groups that meet here at our church and traditionally have been in different classrooms. I think there is something to be said, though, about meeting at homes. It's a little bit more relaxed. It's a little bit more engaging. It's a little bit easier, I think, to open up and talk with one another and to be able to have conversation than it is in a classroom setting, although that is an option.
But if it's all you got, I would say do it.
And so just
hold your back.
for clarity for me, you guys, your small group meets every single week.
We picked like 12 weeks that we meet in a row. Now with the new ministry of young adults changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But historically, we will meet every single week.
So you would meet for 12 straight weeks, and then you'd have a break.
Last year we met pretty much like all year, and then there were times that we were like, like summer we didn't meet that much.
Well, that's not all year then.
Yeah.
Eric.
Well,
that's not
no, it was like sporadically.
Statistically incorrect.
Statistically incorrect.
statistically incorrect.
Can you spell that? No.
That's
good.
STA.
Yeah. Well, Nathan, we appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
Hold on. Where are some PRs that you have?
Some PRs. Well, I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah,
not going to answer that question.
No, why? Why not?
Well, before we wrap up,
we want to know. The world wants to know.
Well,
the people from Hawaii wants to know.
Believers want to know.
How much
little shout out there
does Nathan get bench press?
I got two things before I answer this.
Please, we got to answer these questions.
One, I feel like I would be at a loss if before we left, we didn't quickly talk about just in the workplace finding biblical community. I think that's one thing that you guys mentioned in the beginning. We never circled back to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that
because trying to be done.
I know we're trying to keep this short.
I got things to do.
Bruce and probably has things to do.
I'm kidding. You guys finish up. I'll be back next week.
Listen.
I've got to get back to my actual job.
You're in charge now.
Go ahead.
You have the ball.
Please.
But I just wanted to say, I've been in the secular workforce pretty much my entire life. I worked at Dumas for a little bit. That's like mildly being in ministry, I think. We got some people saved while we were working there, so I think that kind of counts as ministry work. But I've been in like the secular workforce for forever, and every place I've gone to, I've found believers, and we've interacted. We have not believed the same thing by a long shot. Like I've met tons of people where like, other than like Jesus Christ as Lord, like every other piece of theology might be a little screwy, but that's okay. Like I've found, there's comfort in that when you are going through like just weird times at work or things are happening around you that you don't understand. It's good to have a fellow believer that's in there with you, and just conversations that you have with those other believers, I think is huge. Eric, when we had briefly talked about, coming on and like, no, Nathan, you're in the workforce. He's like, talk about like the 10 Bible studies you have a day with all your coworkers, or, like the 16 prayer groups that you've started. And quite honestly, I haven't done that hardly ever. But I have made it a point to like find believers and have conversations with them. Shout out Matt, who I work with right now. Like whenever he comes in the office, and he works remotely, whenever he comes in the office, like we go and we grab some coffee and we just get to have conversations about everything. We get to have conversations about the Bible, and building those relationships, I think, are just so important. Because it is like, you want to talk about isolation, like working in an office of 35 people, all who like hate you because you're a believer, and you have no one to confide in. And you find out like the guy across the hall is like the world's, like he's Billy Graham's grandson and like loves the Lord more than anything in the world. And it's like,
is he actually?
No,
that's sarcasm. Sarcasm is when you say something that you're joking about, but at the same time you're saying it in a way that's kind of like,
it's a generational.
Yeah,
my generation.
Yeah, that's what sarcasm.
But I think it's hugely important. And if you're in a workforce, find fellow believers, like grow in that. Because our interaction with believers in the workplace is incredibly important to our witness to those around us. Like unity is so important. Like to my point of, I've known tons of believers in different workplaces, and it's just like, we still have unity. Like it'd be a different thing for me to be like, you're a believer, you don't believe what I believe, and I just trash you every day. And it doesn't look good to those around us. And so let your unity with other believers in the workplace and that community be a light to those around you. And I think it can be huge. Like we were sitting at an outing a couple weeks back, and we're just talking about like our church's like thoughts on church planning. And like everyone else is just sitting around probably like, what is church planning? You know what I mean? It's just like,
it's a great testimony.
Yeah, it's like, it's a great thing to just, hey, we're believers. We might not be perfectly on point with everything, but like, let's agree to be brothers in Christ, because we are.
That's great.
and let's grow and be a light to those around us.
I think that's great wisdom there. Good counsel.
Yeah.
And so I have a second thing, really quick. As an avid podcast listener, I have a game that I'd like to play with you guys really quick. If we have enough time, Bruce, I know you're pretty busy.
Yeah, Bruce is trying to leave.
Okay,
He's
go
been
ahead.
trying to leave since 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So the game's called Overrated, Underrated.
I'd be here
Overrated,
forever. Yeah, go ahead.
underrated.
The
Okay.
game's called Overrated, Underrated. I have a set of 3 topics beyond the pew related.
Wow.
And the rules are simple. I'm going to give you the topic. You can have your druthers. Now, if you don't know what druthers means,
I don't.
Webster's dictionary would loosely define it as someone's opinion about something. So you can have your opinion. You can say what you want. But the most important rule is you cannot ride the line. It must either be overrated or underrated.
Okay.
Do you understand? So these are beyond the pew specific related topics. And I would say the whole
The Bills,
podcast...
overrated.
Oh, the whole podcast performance depends on your guys' answers right here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So your first topic is going to be a Rolodex. Eric, I know you have trouble remembering phone numbers.
Explain what
I know. So
Rolodex. You know what that is? I mean, I'm
it's a
saying
generational thing.
a Rolodex.
A Rolodex. It's like a thing.
Yeah, I was just saying it's a joke.
for
It
the-
is a generational
like,
thing. No. Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
for a more modern take would be the Contacts app, where you keep your contacts. So a Rolodex would be something someone would keep on their desk that they'd write all the phone numbers or people
Which
they're
that's like
hanging
an
out
old
with.
school thing. A Rolodex is an old school thing.
The yellow books.
No.
Okay.
Nope. Nah.
Anyways.
So the
Okay.
Contacts
Just pick
app.
either overrated or underrated
Yeah.
because you're gonna be
Overrated.
Overrated? Oh, the Contacts app. Overrated. Bruce.
okay.
Bruce.
Contacts app.
The Contacts app, Rolodex.
Overrated.
Overrated. Okay. Second topic, flat-brimmed hats. Overrated or underrated? You can have your druthers here.
Underrated. I don't know what that is. Underrated.
Do you know you're not even you know what you're voting on right now.
The flat bills hat. Yeah, like this. Yeah.
I guess I would need clarifying statement here. Is flat bill cap like there's some that are flat like that I never wear.
Yeah, if I
because
can,
they
like,
look
do this
because they
to
look
this-
ridiculous, and then there's other ones. This wouldn't be considered a flat bill
Yeah,
cap.
this is considered a flat
in
bill. So this is-
comparison.
So if you mean this one, then yes, underrated.
Okay.
If it has a little bit of curve.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the straight flat
Straight one,
overrated.
overrated.
I think
Well, you guys
overrated.
can have your druthers.
Yeah, got
That's
it.
the rule. Like you can have your
Overrated.
druthers. Overrated?
Overrated.
Overrated. Okay. In our last topic for overrated, underrated, sports talk shows / podcasts. I think this one teeters a little bit, so I thought it might be a heated topic here.
Underrated. But if we're talking about the Bills, overrated.
It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, they lost.
I would say overrated because it gives people opinion that really shouldn't have an opinion.
So you would say people that are on podcasts that talk about sports are having opinions about sports that they just shouldn't have.
There are a lot of people who are giving opinions about sports that people are taking as though they're actual like important just because they have an audience that
yeah.
are commenting on things. I think that's in all areas, politics.
Yeah.
I think that's in all areas, church world, that they're giving a hot take on something and people are like, oh, well, they said it on their podcast and they act as though that matters when it doesn't because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
So I would
I
say
would
in
agree
that
to
sense
that.
it's overrated.
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 Okay, let me check your score. Well, it looks like you guys passed. We can air this
Great.
episode.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to leave without the PR questions here.
Oh, rats!
That-
You're really
yeah,
getting
that-
that.
we never said the number, which if you have
Yeah,
any
we
question,
wanna
text
know.
the number to the screen.
You know what the number is?
Which
'Cause you listen all the time.
330-331-6453.
Wow.
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 How do you
And-
remember that number?
Wow. He still doesn't know it, but you know it.
I've been studying. I've listened
Wow.
for 32
well,
episodes.
he's supposed to study too. We gave him 40 episodes.
6453.
He just sits and listens and talks.
I know.
It's-
6453.
I'm a steward. I'm a
6453.
historian.
Ask me how I know it.
No, because it's going to be so confusing.
Algebra.
PRs, though. Let us know.
I don't-
Throw them
Yeah,
out
what is
there.
your PR? You just throw
Yeah.
one PR.
It's one PR. Best squat to date would be 345, which isn't much.
Are we talking
Wow.
one rep, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you got.
Okay.
Well, my
Bruce, what
10
would
rep
be your
PR.
PR?
Yeah. What's your best squat?
Let's
Bruce?
get his. Squat 345.
Squat,
Deadlift.
my deadlift is garbage. I refuse to say this in
No, you
any
gotta say it.
recorded.
Just-
No, I can't.
why? You gotta
I
say-
can't. I can't say it
be-
in
be
any
proud.
recorded capacity.
Why?
The best deadlift.
Is it over or under your squat?
What is the
It's
best?
under.
Your deadlift is under your squat.
Yeah,
That's
I got,
rare.
I got tiny
That's-
little arms.
That's very
What
rare.
is your best movement?
No, bench press, though. What's your bench press?
uh,
PR.
most I've
One
benched
rep.
is
one
like
rep max.
I understand. Just keep asking. I know, 1 rep. Would be like 235.
Nice.
I will say I'm like 3 weeks out from a mock meet, so I'll come back on in the future. I'll report back to
Explain
what those
to him
numbers.
what a mock me is, because he doesn't know.
So the sport of powerlifting, Bruce is familiar with it. There's a picture. Maybe we can splice that in of Bruce coming Bruce coming to the Arnold Sports Festival, I believe.
I have a picture of him flexing in front of a mirror.
Well, it's
No, you don't. I don't know that
Bruce
I've ever taken
shaking
a
my
picture of
hand
me ever with me flexing in front of a mirror.
when he met me at the Arnold. But in the sport of powerlifting, there's the competition is called a meet.
Yeah.
And so rather
I'm
than
aware of that.
well,
why
Bruce,
is he telling
wasn't.
me that?
That's why he asked you.
That's not me flexing in front of a mirror.
Can you show the camera?
That was me flexing to my wife. My wife took that picture.
Oh, that
Listen,
happens to be in front of a mirror.
With the Hulkamania shirt
yeah,
on.
Hulkamania.
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
Indeed, yeah.
So, but Nathan,
That was
we
a
have
long
love.
time ago.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
I'm sure.
Thank you, though. 235, 345, and then something else.
yeah.
You just lay it out there. Throw it out there.
I mean, the best deadlift I've ever pulled is 315. I think I'll be able to do a lot better.
Yeah, you definitely. Do better.
okay.
I'm at this mock
My
meet.
daughter Ella just did that, 315.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I'd
I'm just kidding.
probably-
A little
I-
joke. It's a little joke. It's a little joke.
Oh, also, I've
kidding.
hidden 20 hats under all of the chairs in this room. That we
Nice.
have to find.
I was curious if you were going to break
your
anything out
hats.
because Jeff was really excited about that.
About wearing the
what he
hats.
thought would be a very funny
No,
joke.
they're hidden. We can't end the
And
podcast
he-
until you find them.
Yeah. We'll have to do that another time.
Yeah.
But
We thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
It's been a blessing. You have a lot of great insight. I hope that
Indeed.
if you are watching or listening, that you have been encouraged and challenged by, your example. But there is a question that we always end the podcast with.
we do ask the question.
Yeah.
Before we ask the question, though, I just have to. I want everybody to know up front when I was like mocking your occupation of acting like I was falling asleep, it was a joke. Because like when I was doing that, you didn't give me time to like really.
No.
I was doing that as a joke because he says I
it
always
never
fall
landed.
asleep in the podcast.
I mean, you do
In
always
the-
fall
in
asleep.
the-
There's
in
video
the-
I
proof.
don't fall asleep in
There's
the
video
podcast.
proof.
Listen,
But he said
that
that
joke's still flying. Never landed.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. What's the
And
question?
still
Nathan?
hasn't landed.
You know, because we
Maybe
do the
next week.
podcast.
Maybe next week
we
we'll
do
land.
the podcast every single week. We ask a question as we wrap it up and we close things out. Do you know the question?
I'm very familiar with the question.
What is the question that
is,
we ask?
what does your life look like beyond the pew?
Wow.
Yes, we hope it is honor to the Lord. Thank you, Nathan. Please come back again. We would love to. The audience wants more.
I'm sure they do.
So we would love to.
I'm
hear
sure
you.
they do.
We'd love to hear you again. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, guys.